So today we're starting a new text, the Sri Isopanishad, and it says the Isha, that the most direct meaning is it means the Lord, means Lord. It has the notion of controlling and owning, which we'll encounter quite a bit as the verses progress, and so the name Ishopanishad, it's the Shandi that's formed by joining Isha and Upanishad. So in the Upanishad, the literal meaning is to sit close. I guess it's very interesting topics that would be heard from a sage or the spiritual master, kind of confidential things. The Upanishads come uh, as kind of philosophical treatises at the end of the Vedas, or part of the Vedas, but the main part of the Vedas deal with karma kanda, how to perform pious activities and avoid impious activities. And the Upanishads tend to be philosophical treatises that focus either on liberation and beyond. And so this particular one is dealing with the Lord. And apparently, the existence of the Lord is something that was news to people even back from the beginning of creation, and it still is sometimes today. Uh, most of us here who are already devotees will have heard that already. But the Upanishadim will also give us a lot of information about the Lord and his characteristics and the way he exists. So we have so from the Ishopanishad we will learn about the Supreme Lord. That's what we're supposed to get from this. And then so in today's session we're going to start with the invocation and go through mantra 3. And it's kind of summarizing, so we reach our full potential and we become free from the bondage of karma by recognizing the Supreme Lord and cooperating with him. Find out from this section. The invocation reveals one very essential quality of the Lord here. It's in one sense he's kind of offering his respects to the Lord to begin with, but it also reveals something really interesting. And I'm calling it the mathematics of the Supreme Lord. 1 minus 1 still equals 1. And we'll check into that. Let's see. So here's the invocation. Well, most of us are pretty familiar with this one. People do bhajans to it and things. But Om Purnam Mada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Mudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Now, Srila Prabhupada gives here a kind of purportful translation. And Prabhupada gives us the word-for-word translations, and then he gives us the smooth translations. And especially in verses where it's a little obscure, a little cryptic, or ambiguous, oftentimes he puts explanations into the translation so that people get the right idea right away. And so we're going to look a little later on kind of just at the word for word because it's kind of interesting. Prabhupada gives us a clear understanding through his translation here, but when you look at just the word for word, it kind of highlights the unique characteristic of the Lord that's given here. So let's look at the translation here. So the personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. The word here is purnam, and those are the two main senses of that word: perfection and completion. And because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. There's the 1 minus 1 equals 1. The end there. We'll go to the next slide. And so this is the invocation reveals something important about the Supreme Lord, which makes him unique and establishes the foundation for his supremacy. So that we're going to investigate that. And so I've highlighted here in this slide just the word for word. And it's actually funny when you read Prabhupada's commentary on this verse, he gets into the mood of the verse. As you see that mostly it's just a repetition of different forms of Purnam, completeness. And in the purport, he seems to get into the mood of it, and almost every sentence has one or two completes in it. You see, and so anyway, so it starts out Om, which can be just sometimes it's just like the seed mantra, or here it also, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, is a representation of himself. So Prabhupada says the complete whole in capital letters, meaning God. Purnam, perfectly complete. Ada, that. Purnam, perfectly complete. Idam, this phenomenal world. Usually in Sanskrit or in the Vedas, there's this notion of reference. So if we're inside the world, hearing the Vedas, this is what's around us, and that will be transcendence or God or whatever is beyond. So we have this and that. So this you'd always see, we say idam, it'll always mean this world, because here we're sitting. So it's referring to what's right around us. This.
The material world.
Yeah, just this world, the world we're in right now. Here we are. And so it's phenomenal world, Prabhupada says here. Purnat, from the all perfect, Purnam, the complete unit, Udachite is produced. Purnasya, of the complete whole, Purnam, completely, or all. Adaya, having been taken away, Purnam, the complete balance, Eva, even, of Ashishita is remaining. And so you see, it's a very, very, simple verse, actually. So much of what Prabhupada put in the original translation is his explanation of it. And that makes it kind of cryptic and because of that. So here, I've kind of taken liberties and given kind of a translation from just the word for word. And you can see how kind of cryptic it is, but you can also see, I hope, how it explains the mathematics of it. Because really it says that is complete, Purnam Ada. Right? And then this is complete, Purnam Idam. Right? From the complete, a complete arises, Udachite. Right? And then from the complete is taken away. There's Purnam, and the Purnam is taken away. And then what happens? The complete remains complete. So this is not something that we ever encounter in our experience, as far as I know, that you can produce something from something else and not have at least some kind of pretend. Like we sometimes they use the example of the sun, as all the sunshine is shining for so long, and yet the sun remains the same. But we know actually that at least the potential energy of the sun is being reduced. Some of at least if we follow modern astronomy, that the amount of fusionable material is being used up as the sun goes. So there's some potential energy reduced here. So in this case, we have an object that produces so many other things and is not reduced in any way.
So in the mathematical term, actually, you use the example of 1 minus 1 is 1, right? We can put the example of infinity, because infinity plus infinity is infinity, infinity is minus infinity is infinity.
We can
well, that can be better.
the other thing. Well, I wanted to make it simple as possible.
I
So
see.
another way, because we're going to find out that there's unlimited manifestations actually, Prabhupada. So actually, it's 1 minus infinity
Right.
equals 1. It's probably a close thing.
Oh, yeah, that will be good.
Yeah. So that would probably be, but I wanted to keep it simple, so that to get the basic. I didn't want to necessarily be so precise mathematically, but just to get the basic idea that you're subtracting something from something, and there's no change there. It's the same as it ever was. There's no reduction.
So in this statements you extracted, this refers to the material world, because that is complete. That is the complete whole. That is the Lord. And right. This is complete.
This is complete, and so from the Lord, complete arises, comes out,
like
is created, like the living being, like all of the other universes, like all of Krishna's expansions, so many things. And so in that way, because a complete is arising from the complete, that means there's something taken away. All right? Something has come out of it. So you would think that at least potentially something has been reduced. That this complete thing has expanded in some way, and therefore, at least by some potential measure, there should be less there. But this is no, the complete remains complete. And that's an important characteristic of a unique characteristic of the Supreme Lord that also establishes his supremacy. And we're gonna look a little bit further here. Um, so yes, this is everything that exists is either an expansion of Lord Krishna himself or his various energies. He expands himself, so there's many Vishnu forms and things, and other things are expansions of his energies, including us. Right? But despite having expanded himself so extensively, he remains absolutely undiminished. Purnam, he's complete yet. And even his potential for expansion is undiminished. That's what we understand. And then here, this is described in other places. Prabhupada, in his introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, he says this is the definition of, he calls absolute truth, param satyam. And so this is in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, first offers his respectful obeisances unto the param satyam, the absolute truth. And because the param satyam is the ultimate source of all energies, the param satyam is the supreme person. The gods or the controllers are undoubtedly persons, but the param satyam, from whom the gods derive powers of control, is the supreme person. The Sanskrit word Ishvara, controller, conveys the import of God, but the supreme person is called the Parameshvara or the supreme Ishvara. The supreme person or Parameshvara, he is the supreme conscious personality, and because he does not derive any power from any other source, he is supremely independent. So what Srila Prabhupada explains in that portion of the introduction, he said that there can be many controllers. A controller, we have the various devatas, we can be controllers of certain areas of our existence. You can control things that don't originate from you and aren't specifically yours. I mean, if you have a supervisory position at your business, you're not the business owner, but you may control portions of that. The devatas control portions of the universe. So the Ishvara is that's one aspect, and then there may be many types of those things. And so even you could have the biggest Ishvara of all, controller of all, and not have them be the source of everything and the owner of everything. And this is the Asuras generally think like this. They recognize Lord Vishnu as the most powerful, but they do not understand that Lord Vishnu is the all-powerful. That's why they think they can take over. So the Param Satyam, or absolute truth, means that from which everything comes, the source of all energies. And that puts the Param Satyam on a different level than anything else. Prabhupada says absolute truth means, it's, he says here, independent. Everything else, he says, is relative truth because it comes from the absolute truth. So if you say, what is this? If you trace back and analyze any object, you have to add that it came from the Supreme. But there's no such analysis can happen with the Supreme. That's the unique situation. That's Param Satyam, the absolute truth. That's the meaning of it's a special kind of completeness, right, with the Lord. And it's an important concept in our understanding of the Supreme Lord, to understand that he's not just the most powerful entity, but also the source of everything. And we're going to look at that a little bit more as we go along. So it says the Isopanishad establishes that the Lord is the absolute truth. That's in this for invocation. And this is using our other terminology that we use other places. Now in the purport, Prabhupada raises an impersonalist challenge. This people will say a lot. They'll say that in our experience, having a particular form is a limitation. Right? When I was a young guy, and I was playing basketball, I had all the good post-up moves. I grew pretty tall when I was young, and then stopped. I had all the good post-up moves. So if I was like a foot taller, it would have been good when I was older. But now if I tried to go inside and do that, I get blocked. I got no hope. So, and the same thing, we have certain, whatever we are, whatever abilities we have, we're suited for some things and ill-suited for others. So they can be with our particular form and position gives us certain capabilities, but it denies us others. We can't be something else. And so it's a limitation. I wish, we think, I wish I could look like this person. I wish I could, be as intelligent as this person. I wish I had this quality, plus everything I have now. We think like that. It's a limitation. And so some would argue that since form is limiting, that the supreme with form would be incomplete. That's what they say. So therefore, if we want to deal with the complete, we have to deal with something that is formless. Okay. And but Prabhupada gives us this definition of completion that comes from the Brahma Samhita. Supreme Personality is Satchidananda Vigraha. And he says the impersonal part of the Lord, the Brahman effulgence, represents his aspect of eternity, Sat. It doesn't change, it never goes away, doesn't appear or disappear. The Paramatma, or the Super Soul, is Sat and Chit. It has both eternity and knowledge, also has form. And Bhagavan is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, has eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And because the word here is Vigraha, and so he has form. He's the form of this thing. And so we have this. This is our understanding. But it's the people who argue through logic that having a form is a situation of incompleteness. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport he gives a rebuttal to that notion that having a form is a limitation. He says, if he were formless, or if he were less than his creation in any other way, he could not be complete. The complete whole must contain everything both within and beyond our experience, otherwise he cannot be complete. So a lot of times you'll find with people who want to establish an impersonal basis for the absolute, they'll call it a nothing, sometimes with a capital letter, a capital N, the nothing. Because any quality or any form that it has defines it and then restricts it. So therefore it has to be a nothing, so it's nothing with a capital N. But nothingness is a restriction. Formlessness means it can't have form. That means a lack of completeness also. That's Prabhupada's take on it. He says, if you limit it in any way, then also that's incomplete. So it says, from the Isopanishad, we're going to be able to better understand from the later mantras how the Lord has a form that in no way limits him. So what we understand is that in order for there to be something complete, there has to be a type of form that isn't limiting. There has to be a special type of form, a special type of existence that allows for both of those things to be true. That he's complete and also has form. So it's a unique kind of form, a unique kind of existence that will keep both of those criticisms from being untrue. That a form is a limitation, or a lack of form is a limitation. And we're going to find that's one of the things we're going to learn in Isopanishad, is how the Lord exists in a way that has a form, isn't lacking anything, and but how that form is not a limitation. Now, the other thing we hear in the verse, especially in Prabhupada's translation, and it says purnat, things come out that are complete. Right? The purnat arises from the purnam. So how are we to understand that Krishna's emanations are complete? What does that mean, that they're complete? Because obviously there's also different levels of completeness, because right? the Lord is emanating everything, other things are not. So what does it mean to be complete? So I'm saying that we know Krishna has a unique completeness, since he is the one who produces all the other completes. Yet the verse states that the complete produces other completes. And Prabhupada in the commentary says, the complete whole, the personality of Godhead, has immense potencies, all of which are as complete as he is. Thus, this phenomenal world is also complete in itself. So he's stating the thing. So how do we understand this? And Prabhupada gives us a hint in the purport. He says, the 24 elements of which this material universe is a temporary manifestation are arranged to produce everything necessary for the maintenance and subsistence of the universe. And say there are countless ways, this is just mine here, there are countless ways in which the Lord has expanded himself and his energies, yet they seem to act autonomously and automatically even though it is understood that they are under his control. The completeness of his creations allow him to expand in so many ways while being free to engage in his own personal pastimes. So when the Lord creates something, it acts seemingly by itself. Right? It's not that that the Lord is there, concentrating and using the force, and making things happen that way. Okay, he creates and it works. He says, Rafa says that the material creations come out, and everything just kind of functions, and he's just free to do whatever he wants. We're functioning. He's not having to focus on each and every one of us and make us exist and make us move and these kind of things. And of course, we ourselves try to make robots and things that will act, semi-autonomously, do things by themselves.
So the definition of completeness is very different. That complete that describes the Lord is absolute, whereas that describes us is relative.
It's a different kind of completeness, yeah, between the Lord and us, because obviously because he's complete, he can produce everything and has everything in potential. The creations in themselves don't have everything, but they appear to be, autonomous and independent. They act on their own, and the Lord can just deal with it, can go on dealing with it. There's a occurrence in the Srimad Bhagavatam, uh, where this is kind of brought this to mind. It's in chapter 66 of the 10th canto, where Krishna has killed the king of Kashi, and his son is upset, and he has the Brahmins perform a fire sacrifice and produce this fire demon to go and attack Dwarka. So this fire demon goes, and I think he takes advice of Lord Shiva, and this fire demon goes and attacks Dwarka. And as he's approaching, all the residents of Dwarka are, frightened, and they're running to Krishna. Please protect us! Please protect us! Please protect us! And he says, "Oh, no problem. Don't worry about it." But it says at that time he was involved. The commentators on the verse said that he was involved in playing a game of dice, I think, yeah. And he didn't want to be bothered right then. Huh? And so he turns to his Sudarshan Chakra, who's in a personified form. They all have personal forms. And he says, "You go take care of it. You go handle this." And he does. And he continues to do his own situation. So his energy, the Sudarshan Chakra, could just go, and he gives him an instruction and he goes. He doesn't have to, it's not like the Sudarshan Chakra is a drone, right? And he's, manipulating him this way. He just, go take care of it. You take care of it. So in that sense, there's that kind of completeness. They don't seem to, they're not just kind of products of the Lord's mind, or he's, extensions of of himself that he has to really physically control like he does his own body. And then what I'm saying at the bottom is that ultimately the reason why there's the completeness of Krishna's expansion is that it allows him to have relationships. When we analyze Krishna's existence at the root, what he does with his life, he has the ability to do anything he wants, no restriction. He creates the world around him, so he doesn't have to react to the world around him. He doesn't have any limitations. What does he do? He spends his time with his devotees. That's what he does. That's his lila. Prabhupada calls it pastimes, which means it's his voluntary activity. That's what he wants to do. That's his whole life is centered around that. And so, in order to have relationships, you have to have things that are at least somewhat complete. And if they're drones or robots or zombies, you can't have relationships with them. So that's the ultimate kind of esoteric reason why. Krishna's emanations are complete, especially when it turns in terms of his the individual souls and such things. And everything else relates to that also. All the other expansions figure into those relationships. That's Krishna's ultimate purpose. Now, Prabhupada also, in the purport, he mentions, again, different stages of completeness even for us. And he says that the living beings are small, complete units. They experience incompleteness unless they are engaged in the service of the complete whole. And he says the completeness of human life can be realized only when one engages in the service of the complete whole. So he's kind of anticipating what's going to come next in the next verses. But if we are creations of the Lord, then he says that we have an opportunity, then we have actually a connection with him by virtue of being his creations. And so if we somehow can act in a way that's harmonious with that, because then we reach our full potential. We reach our full level of completeness. And that'll be explained more as we go along. But he's kind of anticipating what's coming next. So Krishna has one type of completeness. We, his creations, have another level. And we also have a lower and higher level of that, though. The higher level means when we're connected with that. Because again, I said that the reason why Krishna has complete emanations is for relationship. So now we're going to head on to the first mantra, which describes the Ishavasyam principle, which is kind of really central to the whole work you have
Quick
put.
question actually. So, the Isopanishad, we have the 18 mantras, right? And these 18 mantras, they came from the Yajurveda or like, because I was reading
Yeah,
somewhere.
they're part of the Yajurveda. Yeah.
So, like, there must be many other mantras. Why we have these 18 special?
They're centered around that particular topic. So all the Upanishads, they have a particular topic that they focus on.
Okay.
So this one is describes that. So they're the Vedas are the emanations from the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're describing in some very essential parts the notion of the Lord.
So these 18 mantras, they're taken out from the Yajurveda, right?
Well, they're part of it, not taken out, but they're part of it. The Isopanishad is part of that. So they're not removed from different parts of the Yajurveda. The whole thing is a part of
So
the.
these 18 mantras, they all together part of the Yajurveda.
Yeah. The whole thing. The Isopanishad is part of the as a whole.
And
Just like Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata.
right.
It isn't comprised of verses from other parts of the
So
Mahabharata.
it's a section.
Section
It's
of
a section of it. Yeah, that's a good way to
So
put
is
it.
there okay? One of my question. So is there any specific thing like Bhagavad Gita? He gave the whole Gita, instruction to the Arjun. Is there 18 mantras? Are we going to have certain goal to achieve, or like what is the objective of these 18 mantras?
The objective of the Isha Upanishad is to understand the Supreme Lord.
Okay.
Isha, yeah?
Okay.
Isha Upanishad, the Lord, and its instructions about that. So we're going to come out from the end of this understanding about the Lord. That the Lord exists, how he exists, and also how we relate to him. Yeah. That's a and the one of the main themes of this is called Prabhupada calls it the Ishavashyam principle, and we'll see what that means when we look into the verse, this next mantra. And so the first mantra, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena chakjena bunjita magratha kasya svidanam. Prabhupada translates it, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, that's tena chaktena bunjita. One should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. Okay? So here he says Isha Vasham is the Isha, the Lord, and controlled by the Lord. We're going to see that this almost an identical verse. There's only two words that are changed. Instead of Isha, there's Atma, which they take as the same thing. And instead of Sarvam, there's Vishvam, that appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. And that verse is quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's interesting that Prabhupada, well, the one in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the smooth translation is identical. But the word for word, he gives a little different take on avasyam. And in the one in Srimad Bhagavatam, he gives a different translation. And so we get and also looks at Atmavasyam in a different way. And it's interesting because it shows, Sanskrit is like this. It has many meanings, and many times when the verses are composed, especially since the Vedas are composed by the Lord, the many meanings are intended, and you can see the full meaning of the verse when they're kind of teased out like that. They're unpacked, and we'll see that the different ways that Prabhupada translate that are going to be explained within the Isopanishad. So I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at those verses to get an understanding of what's going on here. So I've quoted here in this slide that this Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 25:101. As we see Atmavasyam idam vishvam. Everything but ayat kinchit jagacham jagat tena chaktena bunjita ma graha kasyas within the same. So there's only vishvam, which is the same as sarvam. And Atma also, here it says, so here Prabhupada translates Atma Avasyam as the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Soul. The translation he has exactly the same. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things for himself that are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong. It gives exactly the same translation, but in the word for word, he talks about the expansion of the energy of the Supreme Soul. And that's interesting because that avasyam or vasyam means kind of to envelope, or it can be hidden within, which we'll see in this next verse. And so this particular translation in the word for word gets at that notion of Krishna as the source of all energies. He's not just the controller, but he's the source of all the energies that are coming out. His energies are everywhere. Isn't it?
So Prabhu, here you are saying like this mantra, the mantra 1, whatever is here, Isopanishad, is the same meaning from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, right?
Yeah, except that now Prabhupada is finding a little bit different. He's giving different senses of the word avasyam in particular. And so we're there in the Isopanishad, in the word for word translation, he just said owned. Avasyam means owned.
Mm-hmm.
Isha owns it. Now he says that avasyam means that it's the expansion of the energy of the Lord.
So both of the things having the same.
Yeah, so that's part of the sense of
Translation
avasyam. Yeah. And but then he gives a little bit different version in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is um, okay. I want to go ahead. I think I made a. Let me see. No, this is good. This works. Okay, so this gives a certain clarification and confirmation of the Lord as Param Satyam. In the purport of the Isopanishad, it says the Lord's proprietorship over everything within the universe is confirmed in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 4 through 5, where para and apara prakriti are discussed. The elements of nature, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, all belong to the Lord's inferior material energy, the apara prakriti, whereas the living being, the organic energy, is his superior energy, para prakriti. Both of these prakritis or energies are emanations from the Lord, and ultimately he is the controller of everything that exists. There is nothing in the universe that does not belong to either the para or the apara prakriti, therefore everything is the property of the Supreme Being. So that translation coming from the Chaitanya Charitamrita kind of really focuses on the sense of Krishna as the source of all energies. And so that's embedded in this mantra 1. Then in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the same verse that was quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Atmavashamidam Vishwam, and the rest of it being exactly the same. And here he says Atma is the super soul, and Avasham is living everywhere. So here he says, within this universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his super soul feature, is present everywhere, wherever there are inanimate or inanimate beings. Therefore, one should accept only that which is allotted to him. One should not desire to infringe upon the property of others. So this gives an interesting, to me, an interesting addition to the Ishavasham principle, which we're going to look at here. So first of all, the Lord is the source of everything. He's the source of all the energies. Therefore, He's everywhere in that sense. Right? And therefore, because it's His emanation, He owns it and is able to control it. But then also, He's personally present everywhere. Right? So as entities who are trying to encounter and relate themselves to the Lord, right, we should see both of these things. These are integral to the notion of the Ishavasham principle, Prabhupada calls it. That we should perceive everything, not as emanations, as the property, and as being controlled by God, but we also should feel that His personal presence is right at hand. And that helps with our sobriety. It really does. And, we tend to the one story we used to always tell in Detroit. The temple was in this old mansion, and the original owner of the mansion had a bowling alley, which in one area. And so one time when the owner was away, a couple of the servants thought they would sneak in and bowl a few frames. And what they didn't realize is that the bowling alley hadn't been used for a long time, and they were storing all the storm windows behind the lanes. And so they were busted because they broke all the windows. But when we say when the cat's away, the mice will play, and when the owner is away, we may try to take some advantage. And if we have that feeling that not only is it the Lord's, but He's right here, there's a little feeling of sobriety that comes over us. And there's also other elements of that are even more positive that we're going to talk about later.
Quick question actually here. On previous slides, you talk about the para and apara prakriti, right?
Yeah, that was a quote from the purport. Yeah.
On that actually, on para, the intelligence is the part of the para, out of fire, ether.
It's all apara. It's the Krishna talks about the 8 separated bina prakriti, separated potencies.
So those are the para.
That's all. That's the 5 elements.
Right. Okay.
And mind, intelligence, and false ego.
So how come the intelligence is not the apara?
It's not part of the soul. The intelligence is part of. See, when we say that we're a soul, okay, we say, okay, we're not the body. That means also there's a physical body and subtle body. We're not the mind also. In the West, we talk about the mind-body dualism. Right? But we're not the mind. We're conscious of the mind. The separation between self and not self is because consciousness is the self, and what is we're conscious of is not self. So we're conscious of the mind. We're aware of the mind. We say even my mind. The intelligence is the faculty by which we understand our experience. If I take something quickly out of my pocket and show you, there's like that little momentary pause. And think, oh, that's such and such. Where it takes you time to recognize. Where'd that come from? That's the intelligence. And also then our sense of individuality and disconnectedness. All those things are not us. So that's material. That's our subtle body. Not us.
So soul is not the part of.
The soul is para prakriti. The divine. It's divine. The only thing that we perceive really of our true selves at this point in our existence is that we are conscious. Everything else that we think is us is not. It's really that's the best way I could summarize that. So the only thing that we know of our real selves, pretty much at this stage of our existence, is that we're conscious. The fact that everything else that we think is us practically is not. It's false identification.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, it really is at our stage of understanding. That's pretty much all there is. We recognize ourselves as conscious entities. What we are conscious of and what we think we are is almost entirely part of the material energy, subtle or gross.
So Prabhu, actually one question arises here. So 8 elements are there, like total 8 elements, including the mind, false ego, and intelligence. And the soul is different actually. How so? Like once the soul leave the body, the mind and intelligence, everything is gone, or like
No, they go with
is
you.
there?
They go with you. We leave the body. Physical body is left behind, but the subtle body stays with you. We have the same mind. That's why that's why we're so attached to this world. We have a deep impression, some scars embedded in our subtle body that we take with us from life to life.
Mhm.
Okay? All right. So anyway, I want to try to stay. Those are good questions. So I answer, but I want to try to stay focused on our topic here. Those are kind of more general things.
Yeah,
I want us to be able to keep our focus here. But anyway, those are good questions. So I decided to go for it. But let's try to stick with our focus here, so we don't lose track of the progression here. So here I've made a little digression, and I'm trying. I said the Ishavasham principle is of great importance to us as devotees of the Lord. That's why Prabhupada emphasizes this param satyam. And I'm saying it provides a very strong foundation for our faith. We saw in the nectar of instruction how important faith is. It's a sign of our spiritual advancement, and increasing our faith also makes us advance. It's both things. Faith is very important to our status in devotional service. So the Kanishtas, which most of us are, the faith is a little weak. The Madhyamas is very strong, and in the Uttamas it's just unshakable. And so, what is the basis of our faith? And so we can find a lot of support here in this Ishavasham principle if we understand the Lord in the way we have described him so far. And Lord Chaitanya has explained this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 2262. Shraddha, or faith, is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. See, if we think about that, if the Lord is personally present everywhere, if everything is His creation, if everything is controlled and owned by Him, His presence is like that, and He's the most complete, right? If we serve Him, is there anything else we need to do? If we're connected with Him, where else do we go? See, it makes more sense if He's just the biggest controller of things. If He's far distant, it doesn't make then we may be less confident about that. Maybe we have to do some other things. So understanding Him as the Param Satyam makes it more favorable for us to surrender and say, like, I want to serve you. That simply pleasing the Lord will do everything. Another way here let's go here. It provides strong foundation for faith in another way. It says that Krishna's position as the Param Satyam means that he is not lacking anything. He is fully self-satisfied and therefore completely distinct from the tyrants of our experience. Like generally when we have rulers, one of the things we may fear is that there's a supreme. We have experience when we are under the control of others that is oftentimes very unpleasant. And why? Because these people are using you to satisfy themselves. They have their ego, they have their the desire to use you in various ways. Krishna, because he's the source of everything, doesn't lack anything. He's fully self-satisfied. So his orientation to those who are his subordinates are different. And therefore we can be confident that, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, he is the possessor of all potencies, the knower of everything, and the benefactor of everyone. He's quoting the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the Suridam Sarva Bhutanam, that he's the well-wishing friend of everybody. So instead of fearing that having a supreme controller maybe puts us in the way of tyranny, we can feel more confident because of his having everything, that he's not acting out of some kind of neediness or selfish thing. That therefore he has capability to be everyone's friend. It's in a different category. Therefore, we shouldn't extrapolate from our experience of being subordinates with people of this world to him. We shouldn't. A third thing is that if we know that Krishna is personally present and not far away, it makes us feel confident in the Lord's protection and his ongoing concern, I would say as well. Right? So that we can feel again confident that we say, okay, I'm simply going to serve the Lord.
Please forgive me for the delay, but I have a small question. Can you just tell me what Ishavasam means?
The Ishavasya means that the Lord is he's the source of all energies. He's a unique person. Okay? He's the source of everything.
So is the Supreme Ishvara, that's what it
And
means.
well, yeah, and even more, he's he's the supreme Ishvara, but he's also the source of everything. So you can have the biggest controller, could not own everything, could not be the source of everything. The demons think like that. The asuras think like that. He's the most powerful, but they could become the most powerful. If but you can, no one can become. When Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlad, "Where do you get your power from?" Prahlad says, "Same place as you are." Right? So you nobody else could take over that position because they're not the source of everything. And so that makes him unique. So therefore, he's everything that exists is a part of his expansion. It's under his control. He owns it. And the other essence we found was that he's present everywhere in the form of the supersoul. So that's how we define Ishavasya. Okay. And now Prabhupada in his purport he talks about the Vedas. Uh, and so I'm going to lead into this. Since both the world and us are creations of the Lord, it makes sense that the world has a specific purpose and function, and that we have a specific purpose and function within it. It's a unified whole. It's more like a machine than we usually think of in the modern world. In the modern world, we think of like this. In the modern world, we do not generally think that the world has a purpose, and do not think that our role is already specified. Science is based on the notion that there are some basic fundamental principles by which the universe functions, but there is not an understanding that it's a unified creation. But when you look at, if an archaeologist finds some kind of device, one of the things they ask is, what's it used for? So if we were to find a computer in the future, they wouldn't just tear it apart to find out how the little parts work, but to figure out what to do with it. What did they do? What was this for? It gives them a clue how to investigate it and how to deal with it. But in the universe, we don't usually think that way, so we try to break it down to either very small principles or big to very big cosmic principles. And we think that the rest of it happens kind of maybe randomly. Well, it depends on what kind of physics you have. Back in the old days, they thought things were deterministic. Now with quantum mechanics, it's a different deal. But we think that we run computer simulations. You set certain parameters and let it run, and things just work that way. It's not designed for overall purpose. And so we think that we in the modern world we tend to see the world as a sort of raw material that can be shaped and molded or perfected, as we say, according to our plans and desires. Right? So we're trying to figure out how it works, and it's kind of and we're trying to make it better. We're trying to make it work better for us. We don't see it as an already completed entity with a purpose, and that we're free to kind of make our own way within it. That's how we usually think. But when you understand that something is created, it has an overall purpose. We look at it in a different way. And since we're also created, it makes sense, and we're in part of the universe, it makes sense that we have a specified role in it. Does it make sense? Or? Okay. So here, Prabhupada was mentioning in the purport, I'm kind of going back, making a connection back to the nectar of instruction, where it says that this kind of modern mentality that we have leads to atyahara, lolium, prayasa, and prajalpa. The greediness, over endeavor, wanting too much, and wasting time. And Prabhupada mentioned how those things cause real burdens on the earth, where we work so hard to try to develop things and to make more things, and it causes so much also discord amongst human beings because we're always trying to get more and more and more. And so he mentioned the same thing here in the Isopanishad, that if we don't understand the Ishavasham principle, then we also are trying to, you know, find more ways to get more and more and more, to produce more and more different things, to compete with each other, to get more and more of the pie. And there's a connection here between the nectar of instruction and the Ishopanishad. That not understanding the Ishavasham principle is very similar. Because what happens when we understand the Ishavasham principle, we understand that we want to focus on our connection with the Supreme Lord. And so in nectar of instruction, we were saying that this is one way. That if we make our connection with God a priority, then we find ways to limit these other things, the extraneous things. We don't try to just get more and more and more, spend all our time trying to do it. We're not so greedy for so many other things. We try to process simple living and high thinking. We try to focus on that. So he's saying the same thing here, simple living and high thinking.
In this slide, like you are telling, like God is the creator of us, but when we are also eternal,
yeah, let's let that kind of slide for the minute, because we say two things. We say we're eternal beings, but where do we come from? See, at no time was there a creation. See, this is, but at the same time, where do we come from? Krishna says he's Amsha, we're portions of him.
okay.
So for our minds, we talk about being created.
So
Yeah,
for our individuality, he is the cause.
yeah. So there's never was a time when that creation took place,
Yeah.
but we're understood to be expansions of him, Amshas. So we talk about the creation just kind of for we're used to everything being in temporal, in a temporal condition. So that's why even though we're eternal, we're considered to be creations. That's so it's a little.
Yeah.
I don't
Would
know.
you say that creation is related to our body as opposed to our eternal?
No, it also means us too, though.
Also means
Yeah, because he says that we're Amshas of him, and so it's a kind of a paradox because there's a certain lack of time in eternality. But at the same time, he says we're Amshas, we're portions of him. So we didn't. It wasn't that God was existing and we were existing, and we exist. That we're not, that he's not the source of us. That wouldn't be the right thing. That there's a big guy and little guys that existed, and we're part of the original existence. But it's understood that even though everything was eternal, that they all come from Krishna. That all the other Vishnu forms are expansions of him. They always existed too. you know, you know. So it's we're used to temporality, and so therefore logically it's hard for us to grasp this situation. So it makes sense for us to talk about creation in that sense because it makes sense to our brains.
So it is because the time doesn't work the way we think here it works.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I kind of anticipated somebody might say that because of that, but because it just makes sense that to our minds that's how we usually go about it. All right. Yeah. Okay. So if the world has a purpose and we have a place in that, what is that purpose and how do we find it? Okay. And so the Lord has provided the Vedas. I like to kind of flippantly called it the user manual of the universe. We have instruction book how it's to be done. Okay, and because the universe is created and understood, in a certain way, it's understood already. We don't have to. It isn't necessary to do research to discover some certain essential truths about it. It's known by the Creator, and so He reveals that knowledge. So this is how it works. This is what it's for. This is how it works. This is what you ought to do. He provides that information in the form of the Vedas. And here in the commentary, Prabhupada says, animals do not have developed consciousness by which to recognize the Lord, but the human being is sufficiently intelligent to take lessons from the Vedic literature and thereby know how the laws of nature are working and derive profit out of such knowledge. If a man neglects the instructions of the Vedic literature, his life becomes very risky. This is kind of foreshadowing what we're going to get in verse 3 in particular. And he says, then conversely, one who is sober, who knows the laws of nature, and who is not influenced by unnecessary attachment or aversion, is sure to be recognized by the Lord, and thus become eligible to go back to Godhead, back to the eternal home. So it says that we have it's incumbent upon us to find out what our role is, and to take it up. And it's good for us if we do, and not so good if we don't. And then Prabhupada talks a lot about becoming a devotee. And we'll see in the next verse that the Isopanishad also accommodates persons who haven't come to that level yet. But we know, though, that the universal and highest dharma is bhakti. Right? So if we're studying the Vedas, this is what Brahma studied them. How many times? 4 times or 3 times, and concluded that. So it says, since all property belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam verse that's almost identical to this. And I thought really summed it up very nicely. That purport, it says, since all property belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything should be offered to the Lord, and we should take only prasad, tena chaktena bunjita. We should not fight among ourselves to take more than we need. In the purport to this particular verse in Isopanishad, he talks about offering food and taking prasad. Here he generalizes it even more, because it says that tena chaktena bunjita says we should accept what has been set aside as our portion. And so we take that as the mercy of the Lord. And everything that we have, because we know it belongs to Him, we try to satisfy Him with it. That's the devotional mentality that comes from that. For devotees, that's how we'll look at it. He's going to point out in the next verse that if people are not ready to become full-scale devotees, there's a little you can go about it in a little bit different mentality. But since we're here taking the Bhakti Shastri, we need to understand how the devotees will look at it. So if we understand the Ishavasham principle, we'll see that the Lord, everything that we get is prasadam from the Lord. It's not we didn't create it, we didn't earn it some way. It's coming through the mercy of the Lord. If we take it that way, also we build up the situation of gratitude. And whatever we take, we think, well, the Lord is so kind, let me use it in a way that pleases Him. We reciprocate. It starts this process of gratitude and reciprocation. And Krishna is grateful for that, and He reciprocates. So, for us, that's how we'll see it. Now we can. I thought of a objection because Prabhupada says that everything that even if we don't own something just because we construct something out of it. He says he says that there's there's raw materials. And because we create so many things. There's the computer here doesn't grow on trees. You can't plant a seed. You can't collect it. So we have to make so much endeavor to invent it and to assemble it and get all the ingredients together. And in the modern world we talk about value added manufacture. You take the raw material in India, right? In the British days, they would take the cotton, spin it into cloth and sell it back for a profit, and make sure that nobody in India could produce cloth. And so the trade was unfair because they had added value by making the cotton into cloth. You can't wear a cotton ball. Okay, so we may argue that through our own intelligence and labor, we take raw materials and make them into something more valuable. Does not that give us some rightful claim to ownership? That's what we would say. We would say that in normal thinking. And in the next slide, Prabhupada points out that the raw materials are still essential and provided by Krishna. So that Krishna still has a certain right there. And also, one can argue that our minds, bodies, and the ability to do things is also given by Krishna. And therefore, we cannot properly take credit for the labor either. So the value-added argument doesn't hold up. Still all belongs to Krishna.
Okay, going back to Manjushri, in the Isopanishad like that, at the end it says, and we may not accept anything. What's that last line?
We don't take others,
that,
take anything from others' property. We respect others' property. So by the Vedas we have an understanding what's ours and what's not.
But it says here, that we may not accept anything.
That's not part of our quota. So,
Yeah, knowing, well, we should not accept other things knowing well to whom they belong.
and the other translation, he says that we respect other people's property.
Okay. Because I could say, like you said, if someone's, how do you make that distinction that, oh, this isn't, thank you, this is not my quota, this is not my karma to accept this thing. You've been given something, given
No, you
volunteer to
you
do it.
you have an authorized way to
Mhm.
live life by in the Vedas, and so the people can perform sacrifice and they can increase their quota. That's a legitimate way.
Mhm.
You can work in honest ways and acquire more. But it's when we want to break the laws of the Vedas. So it's Dhritarashtra.
Okay.
So you want Dhritarashtra? He wants to be his son to be king, right? And he thinks it makes sense.
Right.
So he was the oldest. He wasn't able-bodied, so it was kind of a bad thing that he didn't get to be. But his sons are there; they're able-bodied. Why they shouldn't do it?
Mhm.
Okay. So as soon as you cross over the Vedic injunctions, then it's illegal. Otherwise, you can perform sacrifices. There's many ways you can even increase your prosperity. That's legitimate. That's your quota.
So performing sacrifices in today's world would mean, well, you can just work honestly and
You can do
live
that.
along in balance,
Yeah,
and if prosperity comes,
yeah,
then you accept it as your quota, as
Yeah.
opposed to saying.
yeah. You think it's the mercy of the Lord.
But it also seems, and yeah, you see this mercy, Lord, and if you have excess at all, it seems that that's when you should be generous, right?
Well, that's it's the other for devotees. We look and see, how can we use it honestly. We're grateful for it and use it in the Lord's service in some way.
Distribute it,
Yeah.
use it in
Yeah,
service.
and then there's ways that it's used properly. And in the Vedic culture, of course, the people who were the Vaishyas were the ones who were the economic engine for the whole society. They had to give so much charity. They paid taxes, high taxes, and they had to give a lot in charity. That was just part of it. Yeah. So here's the mantra 2. Gurvanevaha karmani jijive sachchatam samaha evam twayi nanyetosti nakarma lipyate nare. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way, for that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. So Prabhupada points out that there's kind of 3 kinds of actions. There's karma, which means that you're acting in accordance with the Vedic duties, Vedic injunctions, and that results in, I put in quotations, good karmic reactions, sukriti, things that people consider to be desirable. Krishna talks about that in Bhagavad Gita. You get nice birth, beauty, wealth, all these kind of things come to you. There's vikarma, actions in violation of the Vedas, which result in bad karmic reactions. And then akarma, acting in ways that free one from karmic reactions. And so, from the higher point of view, the karma and vikarma are both bad because they keep you in the cycle of birth and death. Only relative. So he says and so Prabhupada's explaining here that we want to go towards the akarma, the ones that free us from reactions. He gives different types, 3 different types of akarma in the purport. There's bhakti, which are actions aimed directly at pleasing the Lord. But he says not everyone may be ready for direct bhakti, he mentions in the purport. So he mentioned a lot, so in the previous verse, he talked a lot about bhakti directly, but he said that not everybody might be ready for that. But they can still apply the Ishavasham principle in a way that's going to free them from karma. Because that's what the freedom from karma, that's kind of the subtitle for this verse. So he quotes Bhagavad Gita. And so yajna, or sacrifice, is one way. And in the verse, in this translation in Bhagavad Gita, he says that if you perform your karma, the Vedic actions with the desire to please the Lord, that frees you from the reactions of karma. Then he says also that sometimes people are very altruistic. They go just beyond their selfish self-interest and they worry about their family, their country, maybe all of humanity. Calls them these kind of things. Says communism, or even different kinds of things like that. He says so if they do that, or perform other acts of altruism, charity, or other types of things with desire to please the Lord, that also helps. And he quotes the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he says that we shouldn't give up sacrifice, charity, and penance. But if we do these things without notion of reward, that's desirable. So he says if we do these things, either we perform our Vedic duties, as we said, we may still be attached, or we do these other kind of good works. But with this, he says, then they will free us from karma. And the reason he says is all these activities are effective because they are activities in relation with Ishavasha, the God-centered conception. So as soon as you bring God into the equation, it changes everything around. You get karma, good reactions, when you perform them with a desire for a certain result. They're promising you the good reactions, therefore you receive them. When you do them just for the sake of doing them, you avoid any kind of negative karma. Krishna says that every action, no action is perfect. Every positive action, every dharma has some negative. He says, just like where there's smoke, wherever there's fire, every type of dharma will have some imperfection that causes some negative karma. So the Vedas promise to maximize your good karma and to minimize your bad karma. But if you follow your dharma perfectly, you're still going to get negative reactions. So if you do it in the mode of goodness without the desire for results, you'll get rid of that bad effect and only get the good. If you do it with connection with the Lord, then you don't get karma at all. It frees you. So he says that's what we should be. So the Ishavashan principle, that if we understand that situation of Krishna's position, then automatically we should be acting, seeing, okay, it's the Lord's place, it's His universe, we belong to Him, and we act in a certain way for His pleasure, thinking at least in the background. Bhakti, we act directly for His pleasure, but otherwise we can say, look, still whatever I'm doing, I'm getting is the Lord's mercy. Somehow He's the one in charge. Let me at least reference Him that I'm going to try that. I know He's in charge. Let me try to satisfy Him in some way. That will work.
So one question here on yajna, and on the previous slides you said there are three kinds of karma.
And so this is three types of akarma. There's karma, vikarma, and akarma.
Yeah.
So here's three types of akarma.
In akarma we are doing the performing the karma here.
No,
And they are also karma.
But it's your attitude. So akarma means an action which doesn't produce reactions. And so it has to. So karma done in a specific way will not produce a reaction. Because there's only two things. So there's either appropriate actions, that's karma, or inappropriate actions, vikarma.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else you can do. You're either acting properly or improperly. There's no third thing. But it's your mentality when how you're acting properly that frees you from the reaction.
Okay. And in the akarma we have the three: bhakti,
Yeah.
charity, and yajna.
Yeah.
And yajna is also the karma.
But both of these things, well, that's how Prabhupada defines it in the verse in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where work for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise it causes bondage in this world. In the translation, he says that you perform by performing your karma, as a sacrifice, then you're not free. So that's also a type of sacrifice, right? So again, we act appropriately. But we think that by doing that, we're acting, in a way that makes the Lord happy. That's not directly serving the Lord. You see, it's a little indirect. But you think that will please Him, and you're understanding your position as He's the controller and you're controlled. Instead of usually people act according to the Vedas, in order to get the positive reactions. That's what the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas does. It says, here you're a person, you want to be happy, right? You don't want to suffer, right? I'll show you how to do it. You have to follow these rules. Then you'll get good karma and less bad karma. And that's why people do it. I want to get the wealth. I want to get the higher birth. I want to go to the heavenly planets. I want these things. Krishna speaks that way to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He says that the Kshatriyas are happy when it's time to fight. It opens the doors to the heavenly planets. Svarga dwaram upavatam. So you want to go there. So I do it for the payoff. You go to work because they're going to pay you. Okay? And therefore, and you get it. So then you get the reaction. Okay? If you do something that's wrong, you're going to always get a negative reaction. Your mentality isn't going to help you. Right? But if you do the right thing with the right mentality, okay, that determines the type of reaction. So if you do it wanting the reaction, you get it. If you do it simply out of duty, then you don't get the negative imperfections. Because it's that every dharma gives you both. It maximizes the good karma, but it minimizes the bad, but it's always there. Krishna says it's like there's smoke where there's fire. So doing it in the mode of goodness, doing it out of duty, without thinking about the payoff, you get rid of that smoke, and it's only the good. If you do it with a connection with Krishna, then there's no karma at all. Okay? So the Ishavashram principle automatically makes you connected with Krishna. Right? And so these are the various ways. So you may be a full-fledged bhakti where you're simply acting directly to please him. You may be, someone who's just doing, pious activities in some way, and so then you, in some way, you do that as a way to please him without wanting the results. Or there are things you can. So maybe you're attached to all these kind of good deeds type of thing. You do that, also trying to please the Lord, and that connection with the Lord produces the akarma. And then Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 240. It says, acting according to the Ishavashram principle has another special advantage. So in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So he says, even if you only do a little bit, because it says he says in the purport that by doing that you can, go to the spiritual world. But so even if you only do a little bit, so it protects you from falling down into lower species of life. So it says even a little bit of the Ishavashram principle has a huge effect. He quotes Bhagavad Gita in the purport for that. Okay? So now we're on to mantra 3, which is showing what happens if you don't follow the Ishavashram principle. It's the other side of the coin. First we talked about the benefits, why we should follow the Ishavashram. Now it says the danger of not following the Ishavashram principle is given here in mantra number 3. Let's Asurya namate loka andhena tamasavlitaha tamste pretya begachanti ekechat mahano janaha. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the world of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. So Prabhupada says right away, he says, human life is a life of responsibility. We already talked about that. Prabhupada says in the very first verse that we, even though we are complete units, our level of completeness increases when we are connected with the Supreme. So it means that we have a certain choices in our life. And here he says, this is actually from the mantra 1 purport. He kind of anticipates this earlier on. He says, animals, birds, reptiles, and other lower life forms strictly adhere to the laws of nature. Therefore, there is no question of sin for them, nor are the Vedic instructions meant for them. Human life alone is a life of responsibility. The root sin is deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. Disobeying the laws of nature or the order of the Lord brings ruin to a human being. This is also from the mantra 1 purport. So we have that choice. Here Prabhupada says in the purport to this verse, he says there's 2 types of folks, suras and asuras. And he says human life is distinguished from animal life due to its heavy responsibilities. Those who are cognizant of these responsibilities and who work in that spirit are called suras, godly persons. And those who are neglectful of these responsibilities, who have no information of them, are called asuras or demons. Throughout the universe, there are only these 2 types of human being. In the Rig Veda, it is stated that the suras always aim at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and act accordingly. Their ways are as illuminated as the path of the sun. That's how he opens the purport here. Very powerful. And so we understand that the suras follow the Ishavashram principle, and the asuras do not. And here we can see how they're against it. We'll study later Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 16 gives us the whole breakdown of this. But we can see here from this verse, Bhagavad Gita 16:8, how the Asuras don't follow the Ishavashram principle. They say that this world is unreal, without foundation, apratishtam. Krishna is the being, as the Param Satyam is the pratishtam, and no God in control, anishvaram. They say this produces sex desire and has no cause other than lust. So we see those, especially those two things, apratishtam and anishvaram, are antithetical to the Ishavashram principle. There is a controller and there is a foundation, a pratishtam. That we are under. That's the main thing we're understanding about this. So they're saying they don't deal with that. So the Asuras deny that the world is owned and controlled. And then Prabhupada it explains in here where two different places where they end up because they by not doing that they do some heavy vikarma. They're not following the Vedic instructions. And Prabhupada mentions the one place is mentioned in the verse, the place is the place of the Asuras, and Prabhupada mentions another place in the purport, Narakalok, and they're two separate places. So the places in the verse it says the planets of the Asuras. These are the 7 lower planetary systems, called the Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Talatala, Mahatala, Rasatala, and Patala. They're described. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 24, in the summary it says, demons and rakshasas live in these lower planetary systems with their wives and children, always engaged in sense gratification and not fearing their next births. And in the mantra, the purport to this mantra says, he is forced to transmigrate to the Asura planets and take birth in degraded species of life to work hard in ignorance and darkness. And then there's the other place, hellish planets, is Narakaloka. They're different. So oftentimes we say that the lower planetary systems are the hellish ones. It's not though. And when the universal form is described, these 7 planets go all the way down to the feet of the universal form, and then just as is below the universal form, just above the Garbhodak ocean, are the Narakalokas, along also with Pitralok, where Yamaraj lives. There's even further down. And there's described in the 5th canto all the different hellish planets. There's 28 of them. I'm going to go through them all. They're just listed. And Prabhupada explains I didn't put the reference. This is also in the 5th canto, chapter 24. The verse I didn't put. If one acts in the mode of ignorance, this is a translation, because of madness, his resulting misery is the least severe. One who acts impiously but knows the distinction between pious and impious activities is placed in a hell of intermediate severity. And for one who acts impiously and ignorantly because of atheism, the resultant hellish life is the worst. And then here those two things are mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, both of those destinations. 16:19, those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are perpetually cast into the ocean of material existence in the various demonic species of life, asurishu yonishu, into the wombs of the asuras. Krishna says in the 16th chapter. And then he mentions earlier on actually in 16:16, those who are, same thing, 16:16, thus perplexed by various anxieties and bound by a network of illusions, they become too strongly attached to sense enjoyment and fall down to hell. We see the narake. So the verse mentions the planets of the Asuras, and Prabhupada mentions Naraka in the purport. And so that's what happens if we do not follow the Ishavashram principle. We will produce so much vikarma that we'll have a bad future. Krishna also mentions in that 16th chapter that he keeps putting that they perpetually take birth in those lower planetary systems. It's very difficult for them ever to approach him. And that's really the situation down there. It's just as an aside, it says that those 7 planetary systems, there are some places of them that are called Bilaswarga, subterranean heavenly planets. So when we think of being miserable down there, it's not just suffering as we think of suffering, pain, and all this kind of stuff. But the pain, the real pain there, because it mentions in the fifth canto how Mayadanava, the greatest technology guy in the universe, is down there. He's protected by Lord Shiva. He says he has no chance of experiencing spiritual bliss. So the real suffering in those places is the not being able to be connected with God and not being and here the word used in the verse is Atmaha, killer of the soul. Right? And so the soul is meant to be connected with God. It's a spiritual entity. And if we enter into the lower planetary systems, if we're not concerned about God, we cannot develop that part of ourselves. So that's a kind of severe misery.
It seems so heavy. Really. You know, Krishna, God is like compassionate or whatever that, you know, because I come from the Catholic tradition, you know, that you burn in hell forever.
Well, that's
I have particular sensitivity to hellish planets, but I mean, on one level, you know, we turn our back on Krishna, we're here, we're enjoying, we do stupid things or whatever, but it just seems so heavy, and how does that balance out with the fact that we all have a chance and that we're eternally connected?
Well, it's of course it's one thing. Of course, in the Christian version of hell, it is eternal. You live once, you are judged, and you either are in paradise forever, or you suffer forever. That's their notion. But in the Vedic conception, by your karma, you go to different places in the universe, and the earth is the place where you make karma. So if you have if you have just kind of a mixed bag of karma, you come on the earth. We have a mixed bag here. That's why we both have some happiness and we also suffer, depending on the proportion. If we have a really, really large amount of good karma, we go to Swargaloka, where I call it intensive good karma reduction. You get to cash it in and hang out in this beautiful vacation spot for quite a long time. But it runs out, and you come back down again. So then if by some chance you've done so many bad karmas, and you see the real, most of the time, the karma relates to how you interact with other creatures. So you're causing either benefit or suffering to others. And so when you have so much bad karma, you're a cause of suffering and pain for so many other entities. Then you get the reactions that you have to be on the other side. This is part of your education, really, to see what it's like. Because we can be heartless and we can do things to others, and because we don't feel it, we don't think anything about it. So then you have to feel it. And so the hellish planets are really super intensive bad karma reduction.
That also runs out, and then you can.
That runs out. Yeah, that runs out. It's not, it's in proportion. It's proportionate to your actions. Here in this world, we have the ability. We're under the law of fairness. We've decided to be independent of the Lord, to some degree, and we're under the law. We get what we deserve, in the same proportion we've acted. Yeah. Now, Krishna, his modality is the mode of mercy. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, if we surrender to him, you don't worry about your sinful reactions. He says, okay, we wipe it clean. But as long as we want to maintain our independence, then we're under the laws of fairness. It's just fair. You did all this stuff, caused so much pain, now you've got to feel that much pain. You did all this good, you made people happy, now you can feel all this happiness. You deserved it. You've earned it both ways. It's fairness. It's scary. It's still scary, but it's fairness. And here is the place where we can be a little independent. That's why we're here. If we change our minds, all that karma can get burned up. Because Krishna is under the law of mercy. So here at the end it says, the Vedic scriptures and the acharyas, or saintly teachers, are compared to expert boatmen, and the facilities of the human body are compared to favorable breezes that help the boat ply smoothly to its desired destination. If, with all these facilities, a human being does not fully utilize his life for self-realization, he must be considered Atmaha, a killer of the soul. We know that the soul is immortal and cannot be killed. But figuratively, it is done so if we put ourselves in a circumstance where the the nature of the soul can't be realized and activated and developed. So the more that we're um, focusing outward, focusing on the false coverings of the mind and the subtle and gross body, the less the soul is able to develop. I said in our situation, so much of it we just know we can understand ourselves as consciousness, and so almost everything else that we think about ourselves, has some connection with our false identification. We're trying to correct that, but if we don't, then we're just even the lower animals that they can't understand anything about being a soul. We at least can have a chance to understand that and to cultivate that. So the influence of the soul becomes covered over more and more. So that's why it's called the killer of the soul.
Like you told, like whoever is not following the Isopanishad principle,
Mm-hmm.
either they may go to subterranean, all the lower planets, or hellish planets.
Mm-hmm.
But suppose an atheist who may be thinking of some social welfare activities and doing kind of charity and kind of other work, he may accumulate some vikarma, right?
Well, somebody who's doing the charitable works and connecting it with Krishna, that's Ishavashram principle.
Exactly.
Somebody who's maybe not, chances are, they're at least, they
So you got me.
they can also get some pious credits from that. They can do that. But generally, it says that the people who are really, especially against the Ishavashram principle, they're not going to stay they're not going to act very nicely most of the time. So that's why there's different locations you can go, different levels of hells, different levels of the subterranean planets, different places on Earth we can go by our specific combination. But here it's just pointing, especially those who are against the Ishavashram principle, they have a high chance of performing a lot of vikarma. If somehow they don't, well then they can get some pious credits. That's okay.
Because the reason I'm asking, I could see like some strong atheists, they will never accept the authority of God, but still.
And sometimes they'll do good works. Yeah, that's okay. So they'll get those pious credits. They generally though when there's a notion of independence, when there's not a controller, when there's not rules, the real tendency is to be controlled then by your passions, and that will cause you generally to cross over the borderlines of proper behavior. There's a higher chance of that. Yeah, there's a much higher chance of that, to cheat and to do such things.
As I understand, also, if someone is atheistic and averse to the Vedic principles of Dharma, then when they try and do some charitable activity, they may do it in a way that causes suffering to some other living entities. For instance, we want to feed other human beings, so we feed them hamburgers, right? So we're murdering so many cows. Without following the Vedic injunctions, then we don't really do our charitable work properly either.
It's just people in those kind of modes don't know how to even if they have good intentions, they don't know how to do them. Yeah, they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to deal with it. Yeah, so that's why it's just less likely that they're going to avoid vikarma. It's these things are they're what happens the majority of the time. There's always different kind of cases, but they don't know what's right and wrong. Oftentimes they'll think also what is right is wrong. The Hiranyakashipu very famously tried to reverse the results of pious and impious activities. He thought doing good for others is a ridiculous thing. Why don't we simply rely on our own strength? Those who are strong can get what they want, and those who aren't, too bad for them. Why should we have all this notion of cooperation and be kind to people? Because this is just stifling us who are powerful. That doesn't make any sense. He thought it was crazy. He thought the Lord Vishnu and the Devatas and all the devotees are just like a big mafia, pushing forward their own personal agenda. That was really bad for good people like him.
Stifling the economy.
Yeah. So it works like that, So yes, they can't even have even a conception of what's right most of the time, But if somehow not, they can get the pious activities, but it's just the chances are not very good.
Not very good.
So just repeat what you said now. Just like no, I'm
So,
sorry. Just,
so I guess this is somebody who isn't following the Ishavashram principle. Also, we understand if we don't keep God in mind somehow, even as devotees, we try to do the right thing, but we have this karmashayan, this deeply rooted desire for material enjoyment, and we also oftentimes don't do what we want to do. So imagine if somebody doesn't have even the conception that there's a right. They don't have a conception that there's a controller, that there's an objective right and wrong. How they won't be carried away by their passions. And so it says they oftentimes they think that what's wrong is right. Somebody in the mode of goodness understands what's right. Somebody in the mode of passion, they will cheat, and they'll think maybe in this case it's okay. They'll find the ways, because their passions are strong, and so they want to do what they want to do. Somebody in the mode of ignorance usually confuses the right for wrong and the wrong for right. And so what Prabhu is saying is that sometimes they might do something charitable like feed people, but they feed them things that cause harm. Feed them meat. And because their whole conception is wrong, so they don't even know how to do it. So even if they have good intentions, they do something wrong. So without the Ishavasham principle, our future is not very bright.